Was this an accident? That was the question everyone asked in the beginning. Because accidents happen. Trees fall, branches break, but sometimes things don't fall on their own. On a crowded holiday afternoon, in a place filled with families and children, something came down from above. And in a matter of seconds, an entire family's life was erased. What makes this case disturbing isn't just how she died. It's what happened afterward. The silence, the lies, and the people who walked away. Monday afternoon, early September, in the small Midwestern town of Ashford Ridge, Labor Day weekend had arrived with perfect timing. The weather was warm, but not heavy. The sky was clear, and by late morning, the parking lots at Redwood Falls Nature Preserve were completely full. Redwood Falls was the pride of the region. Towering cliffs, winding stone staircases, waterfalls hidden deep in the woods. A place families returned to year after year. That afternoon, hikers filled the trails. Parents held the hands of young children. Teenagers laughed loudly as they passed strangers on the path. Cameras clicked everywhere. It was the kind of place where danger didn't feel real. Among the visitors that day was Emily Carter. Emily was 43 years old, a professional photographer, a mother of 4. She wasn't there for leisure. She was there for work. Emily had built her life around 2 things: her children and her camera. Friends described her as warm, energetic, endlessly patient. The kind of person who made people feel comfortable within minutes of meeting her. Photography wasn't just a job for Emily. It was how she supported her family. Senior portraits, weddings, family sessions. Moments that mattered. That afternoon, she was photographing 6 high school seniors. The shoot had been planned for weeks. Redwood Falls offered dramatic backdrops, stone staircases carved into cliffs, overlooks framed by trees, natural light spilling through the forest. The students posed. They laughed. Emily moved easily between them, adjusting angles, offering encouragement. Nothing felt rushed. Nothing felt wrong. By early afternoon, the session was nearly finished. Emily gathered her gear and began walking back up the stone staircase that led toward the main overlook. The students followed behind her, still talking, still joking. Then it happened. A sound ripped through the air. Not a crack, not a snap. Something heavier, something violent. The noise echoed off the rock walls. Sharp, sudden, unforgettable. The students stopped. They turned. Emily was on the steps. Her body lay twisted against the stone. She wasn't moving. Beside her, resting unnaturally on the staircase, was a massive log. Panic. For a moment, no one spoke. Then someone screamed. One of the students ran up the stairs, her hands shaking as she pulled out her phone. 911. Where is your emergency? The girl struggled to breathe. We're at Redwood Falls. By the overlook, a tree fell on her. A tree. That's what it looked like. That's what everyone assumed. Because the alternative, that someone caused this, didn't even cross their minds yet. Emergency crews arrived quickly. Redwood Falls was a public park, and rangers were already nearby. But the moment paramedics reached Emily, their movements slowed. They didn't begin CPR. They didn't rush to load her onto a stretcher. The injury was catastrophic. Emily Carter was already gone, killed instantly. As word spread through the park, trails were closed. Visitors were redirected. Parents covered their children's eyes as they were guided away from the staircase. Most people believed what they were told. A tragique accident, a falling tree. Investigators from Park Services were the first to examine the scene. And almost immediately, something didn't sit right. The log wasn't small. It wasn't a branch. It was nearly 6 feet long. Thick, dense, heavy. Later measurements would estimate its weight at around 75 pounds. This wasn't something that snapped off easily. It wasn't something that simply fell. And the ends of the log told another story. The cuts were clean, straight, weathered. This wasn't fresh wood. This log had been cut long before that day. To understand what happened, investigators had to go up. They climbed to the top of the cliff above the staircase. What they found changed everything. Just beyond the tree line, several more logs were stacked together. Same size, same cut marks, same weathering. They were piled neatly on the ground, not near the edge, not in danger of falling. Measured later, The pile sat more than 40 feet from the cliff. Too far to roll, too heavy to move by accident. This wasn't a natural fall. Someone had carried that log, and someone had placed it near the edge. Investigators measured the distance from the top of the cliff to where Emily's body had been found. 76 feet, roughly the height of a 6-story building. With the weight of the log and the height of the fall, the outcome would have been unavoidable. But now another question emerged. Who would do this? And why? Redwood Falls wasn't remote. It wasn't isolated. On holiday weekends, the park welcomed thousands of visitors. That afternoon, parking lots were overflowing. Trails were crowded. Families filled the lower walkways beneath the cliffs. Anyone standing at the top of that overlook would have known this, which raised a terrifying possibility. If someone pushed that log, they would have known someone was below. By the end of the day, the death was no longer considered a simple accident. The county sheriff's office was called in. Homicide detectives took over. The case was officially labeled suspicious. Investigators began canvassing the park, speaking to anyone who had been in the area. Several witnesses reported seeing teenagers near the overlook earlier that afternoon, but no one had seen the log go over, and no one had come forward. Days passed, then weeks. Emily Carter was laid to rest. Her children returned to school without their mother. Her husband tried to answer questions he didn't have answers to. The park reopened. Life moved on, but the case didn't. Investigators were stuck. No fingerprints, no cameras, no one claiming responsibility. Until nearly a month later, a phone rang inside the Ashford County Sheriff's Office. The caller was a mother, her voice hesitant. She explained that her daughter rode the school bus with another girl, and that girl had been dating a boy who couldn't stop talking. According to what her daughter had heard, he had admitted being involved in what happened at Redwood Falls. Not an accident, not a freak incident, but something that had gone horribly wrong. The name she gave detectives stopped them cold. 2 teenage boys had been at the park that day. Friends, bored, wandering the trails with nothing better to do. Their names were Evan Brooks, 16, and Lucas Reed, 17. Detectives requested to speak with Evan first. They went to his high school. When they met him in a conference room, something stood out immediately. Evan's right hand was injured, bandaged, swollen, and before detectives even finished explaining why they were there, Evan started talking. Fast, unprompted, as if he'd been waiting. And as the words poured out, the story kept changing. The conference room at Ashford Ridge High School was small. No cameras, no two-way mirror, just a table, 3 chairs, and fluorescent lighting that made everything feel colder than it should have. Evan Brooks sat with his hands folded in front of him. His right hand was wrapped in gauze. Before detectives even asked a question, Evan spoke. I was there that day. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't a question. It was an admission. Detectives exchanged a glance. People who are innocent don't usually start there. Evan said he and his friends had gone to Redwood Falls because they were bored. No plan, no reason, just walking. He said they were near the overlook when someone ran past them shouting that a woman had been hit by something. That's when they left. They didn't see anything. They didn't hear anything. They didn't know anything. But Evan kept talking, repeating details no one had asked for, rewinding his story and correcting himself mid-sentence. Detectives let him go. They'd learned enough to know one thing for sure. This wasn't the whole truth. Later that afternoon, detectives received confirmation of the bus conversation. Another student had come forward. She said Evan had sent messages to his girlfriend after the incident. Messages saying something serious had happened. Something he couldn't talk about over text. Something he was afraid of. Fear doesn't come from accidents. It comes from consequences. Detectives returned to Evan. This time, they read him his rights. His voice shook slightly as he said he understood. Then he leaned forward. I want to tell you everything. His second story was different. Now he admitted being near the logs. Now he admitted touching one. But he insisted he didn't push anything, didn't throw anything, didn't know what was going to happen. It was someone else. Someone he didn't want to snitch on. That word changed the room. This wasn't about snitching. This was about a dead woman. Eventually, Evan said it. Lucas Reed, 17 years old, junior, known for being reckless. Evan claimed Lucas had kicked the log, that it just rolled, that it wasn't intentional. But detectives had already walked the cliff. A 75-pound log doesn't just roll. Not 40 feet. Not without effort. Detectives asked Evan about his injured hand. He said he'd wrecked his scooter, fell while riding. But the injury didn't match. Scrapes were shallow, bruising deep, more consistent with lifting or dragging something heavy. Evan noticed their eyes linger. His posture stiffened. The talking sped up again. After nearly an hour, Evan's story shifted. Again, he admitted helping move the log. Just a little, just to get it unstuck. He claimed Lucas was the one who kicked it over. But then he said something else. Something small. Something devastating. He said he was afraid of being charged with involuntary manslaughter. Detectives paused. "You know what that is?" one asked. Evan nodded. "You don't research charges unless you're worried you qualify." Then Evan mentioned something unprompted. A photo. A selfie taken after the incident. Detectives asked to see it. In the picture, Evan and Lucas stood smiling. Behind them, park trails. Families. Emergency lights barely visible in the distance. A woman had just died, and they were taking pictures. Detectives brought Lucas Reed in next. He arrived with his mother. She was angry before the door even closed, demanding to know why they were wasting her time. Lucas sat silently, arms crossed, eyes forward. His story was simple. He was there. He heard someone got hurt. He left. That was it. But detectives didn't need Lucas to talk. They already had enough to know the boys' stories didn't match. When detectives confronted Lucas with Evan's statements, he shook his head. Evan was lying. Evan touched the log. Evan moved it. Lucas claimed he barely noticed it. Then detectives mentioned witnesses. Another teenager, a girl named Maya Lewis. She'd been with them. Lucas swallowed hard. Maya had told investigators everything. That both boys touched the log. That they joked. That she begged them to stop. Under pressure, Lucas admitted something else. After the incident, the group talked. They agreed not to tell anyone. They rehearsed what to say. An unspoken pact. Teenagers trying to outsmart reality. But reality doesn't forget. Eventually, Lucas cracked. He admitted touching the log. Admitted flipping it around a tree. He said he had second thoughts. That he walked away. And then, it went over. He said Evan kicked it. Evan said Lucas kicked it. Each pointing at the other, but both admitting involvement. Lucas's mother erupted. She accused detectives of manipulation, of trying to trap her son. She demanded lawyers, lie detector tests, proof. But detectives already had it. 2 confessions, physical evidence, witness statements, and the log itself. Lucas was detained. His mother screamed as he was escorted out. Evan watched from another room, silent now. The talking had stopped, because now it was real. Juvenile detention, courtrooms, charges, a death they couldn't undo. That evening, detectives returned to Redwood Falls. This time with Evan. He walked them through his version of events. Pointed, paused, changed his story mid-sentence. Claimed he didn't see Lucas kick the log. Then said he heard it. Then said he turned away. Detectives demonstrated how sound carried. How footsteps echoed. How impossible it was not to notice. Evan had no answers. Only excuses. After the log fell, they didn't call for help. They didn't run for help. They walked past emergency responders. Stopped to argue. Took a selfie. Went home. Ate snacks. Rode scooters. A woman lay dead beneath the cliff. Detectives asked Evan one final question. "Did you think someone might be down there?" Evan nodded. "How likely?" "Pretty high." That answer sealed it. By the time the interviews ended, it was dark. The kind of darkness that settles in slowly, not just outside, but inside. At Redwood Falls Nature Preserve, the trails were empty again. The overlook stood silent. No hikers, no laughter, just the sound of insects and distant water. Earlier that same day, thousands of people had walked those paths, and none of them knew how close they'd come to disaster. Now 2 teenage boys sat in separate rooms, each realizing for the first time that their lives were no longer their own. Evan Brooks hadn't spoken much since the walkthrough. The talking, the rambling, the nervous explanations, all of it was gone. In its place was something else. Salt? He asked detectives what was going to happen next. They didn't sugarcoat it. There would be charges. Serious ones. Because regardless of who kicked the log, regardless of who touched it first, their actions resulted in a death. Evan stared at the table. For the first time, he didn't argue. Within hours, the Ashford County Prosecutor's Office reviewed the evidence. They didn't see two confused kids who made a mistake. They saw a heavy log moved from a pile, carried toward a cliff, on a crowded holiday, with clear awareness that people were below. This wasn't a freak accident. This was recklessness bordering on indifference, and the law had a name for that. Both Evan Brooks and Lucas Reed were charged with reckless homicide, involuntary manslaughter, felonious assault. Despite being minors, prosecutors made a rare move. They asked the court to bind the case over to adult court. The argument was simple. This wasn't childish mischief. This was behavior that showed a complete disregard for human life. News spread quickly through Ashford Ridge. The town was small. Everyone knew someone connected to the case. Parents were furious. Some demanded the harshest punishment possible. Others struggled with the idea that teenagers, kids they'd seen grow up, were now facing murder charges. But one group felt something else entirely. Emily Carter's family. Emily's husband returned to an empty house. Her children asked questions he didn't know how to answer. Why didn't anyone help her? Why didn't they call for help? Why did they leave? There were no words that made sense. Just silence where a mother used to be. At the probable cause hearing, the courtroom was full. Both boys sat at separate tables. Their parents sat behind them. Emily's family sat together on the other side of the room. The judge listened as prosecutors laid out the facts. Then came the testimony. Maya Lewis, the teenage girl who'd been with Evan and Lucas that day, took the stand. Her voice trembled. She said both boys touched the log, that they joked about pushing it, that she told them to stop, that she knew people were below. She testified that Evan said there was probably no one down there. She testified that Lucas kicked the log, and she testified that afterward, they didn't panic. They didn't rush for help. They left. The judge didn't take long. There was probable cause, enough to believe a crime had been committed, enough to believe both boys played a role. The case would move forward, and it wouldn't stay in juvenile court. Gasps rippled through the room. Lucas's mother cried out. Evan's parents stared straight ahead. The boys were led away. Months passed. Court dates were scheduled, postponed, rescheduled. Both sides prepared. Defense attorneys worked to reduce charges. Prosecutors worked to keep them. Meanwhile, life went on for everyone else, which made the waiting unbearable. Eventually, reality set in. Trials are unpredictable, and the evidence was overwhelming. Both Evan and Lucas were offered plea deals. They would plead guilty to involuntary manslaughter. In exchange, murder charges would be dropped. They would return to juvenile court. Sentencing would be capped. It was the only way forward. Both families agreed. In September, nearly a year after Emily Carter's death, both boys stood before the judge. They pled guilty, not to intending to kill, but to causing a death through reckless behavior. The words echoed in the courtroom. Involuntary manslaughter, a legal term that still carried permanent weight. The judge didn't rush. He spoke carefully. He acknowledged their age, their lack of criminal history, but he also acknowledged the victim. A mother, a wife, a woman doing her job. He sentenced both boys to 3 years in juvenile detention, the maximum allowed. There were no cheers, no relief, only exhaustion. Evan and Lucas were taken into custody. They would spend the remainder of their teenage years behind locked doors. School replaced by structure, freedom replaced by routine. Time to think, time to remember, time to carry what they'd done. Maya Lewis faced charges as well, not for the log, but for what she did afterward. She pled guilty to obstructing official business. Her sentence was suspended. A warning, a reminder that silence can be its own crime. Nothing brought Emily back. Nothing fixed what was broken. Her children grew older without her. Holidays passed. Photos remained unfinished. In Redwood, Falls stayed open. Visitors still walk the trails, still stop at the overlook. Most have no idea what happened there. When a case ends, the paperwork stops. The cameras move on. But time doesn't reset for the people left behind. In Ashford Ridge, life returned to something that looked like normal. Kids went back to school. Families filled the grocery stores. Cars lined up at stoplights. But for the Carter family, time fractured. There was life before the cliff, and life after. Emily Carter used to be everywhere. In the house, at the dinner table, behind the camera. Now she was nowhere. Her husband learned to answer questions with silence. Her children learned what grief sounds like, the kind that creeps in at night when distractions fade. No sentence could fill that space. No apology could repair it. In juvenile detention, Evan Brooks and Lucas Reed lost their names. They became numbers. Schedules replaced choices. Time slowed down. Both boys were required to attend counseling, to sit in rooms and talk about what they'd done, about responsibility, about consequences. For the first time, there was no one to deflect blame onto. No friend to point at. No pact to hide behind. Only memory. Years later, during parole reviews and evaluations, both boys described the same moment as the one they couldn't escape. Not the push, not the sound, but the walk away. Passing people who were running toward the scene. Choosing silence. Choosing themselves. That was the moment that haunted them. Redwood Falls Nature Preserve still looks the same. The cliffs haven't changed. The trails are still crowded on weekends. Children still lean over railings, laughing, unaware. But some locals refuse to walk that staircase. They say the air feels heavier there, as if the place remembers. Was this murder? The law said no. The law said reckless. But the law doesn't measure intent the way people do. Intent lives in moments, in choices, in whether you stop or push. This case wasn't about monsters. It was about impulse, about boredom, about how quickly curiosity can turn into catastrophe, and how the absence of empathy, even for seconds, can end a life. Many defended the boys at first. They were just kids. But kids understand gravity. Kids understand danger. Kids understand that heavy things falling from high places hurt people. What they didn't understand was permanence. Emily Carter didn't just lose her life. Her children lost guidance. Her husband lost a partner. Her clients lost memories that were never captured. And 2 teenagers lost the chance to grow up without this following them. Everyone lost something. Not equally, but permanently. Visitors still stop at the Overlook. They take photos. They smile. They don't look down, because looking down would force them to imagine it. The height, the weight, the sound. There is no ending that feels right. No lesson that fixes it. Only a reminder. Recklessness isn't harmless. Silence isn't neutral. And moments matter more than we realize. On a holiday afternoon, in a place meant for peace, one decision shattered countless lives. Not because it was planned, but because it wasn't stopped. And sometimes, that's all it takes.